I drove 9 hours through a thunderstorm with aching knees and a homemade carrot cake on the passenger seat. My name is Margaret Lane. I'm 78, a widow for 12 years, a retired teacher, and a mother who thought she was doing the right thing. It was my daughter's 50th birthday. I hadn't been invited, but I wanted to surprise her. I imagined her eyes lighting up, that delighted gasp, the way she used to hug me tight when she was a child. But when I stepped into her house, soaked from head to toe, I didn't see balloons or hear a welcoming mom. I heard her voice from the kitchen clear, unmistakable, and cruel. God, I hope she crashes. Then we won't have to deal with her constant calls, my daughter Laurel said. Her husband, Ethan, laughed. Or at least gets lost. Give us one weekend without the guilt trips. My hands trembled. I left the cake on the counter and walked out. 9 days later, I changed my will. 3 weeks later, their credit cards started declining. At 78, I finally learned that revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it comes with financial consequences. After my husband Richard died of cancer, I stayed in our small colonial home in Vermont. The memories were all I had left, and I clung to them like old photos you can't throw away. Laurel was my only child. I raised her on my own. I worked double shifts, skipped holidays, even sold my engagement ring to help her through college. I did it out of love, not obligation. In those early years, she used to call me every Sunday. She'd share stories, ask for recipes, tell me about her students. But over time, the calls shortened. Her voice grew clipped whenever I mentioned visiting. There were always new excuses. Work was hectic. Ethan's parents were coming. They had house renovations. One Christmas, they went to Barbados instead of coming home. Work's been crazy, she texted, while their Instagram showed cocktails and beach sunsets. Still, I didn't give up. I sent care packages with homemade cookies, scarves I'd knitted, and birthday checks that grew larger each year, hoping maybe money could buy me a sliver of her time. I baked her favorite cinnamon scones and froze them in batches, just in case she dropped by. I didn't realize then that my love had become transactional, not in my heart, but in theirs. There was the time they said they couldn't afford a visit because of their kitchen renovation. I offered to help, and they refused with, "We'd never ask that of you, Mom." But later I found out I was listed as guarantor on the renovation loan. Then there was the down payment for their starter home, a modest 2-bedroom, that somehow turned into a 4-bedroom Tudor with a heated pool. Again, I was told it was all their hard work. I only found out I co-signed after I saw my name on some forgotten paperwork in a pile of junk mail they sent me by mistake. I blamed myself. Maybe I was too needy. Maybe I hadn't moved on after Richard. Maybe I called too often, shared too much, lingered too long. But looking back now, I see it clearly. They didn't just take my money. They took my love, wrapped it in paperwork, and used it to build a life where I had no place. And I let them until that birthday night. It took me 2 full days to bake that cake. 3 layers of spiced carrot cake with cream cheese frosting, topped with tiny marzipan carrots I shaped by hand. My fingers don't bend the way they used to, but I made 24 of those little carrots, arranged like a garden. Laurel had loved carrot cake since she was 7. Chocolate, she once declared, was too predictable. I told my neighbor Theda about my plan. We'd lived side by side for 32 years. She watched Laurel grow up and brought me casseroles during my chemo. "You're really going to drive all that way alone?" she asked, standing in her gardening gloves, hedge clippers in hand. "It's not the Oregon Trail, Theda, just the interstate." "You and your knees don't mix well with rain?" she muttered. I just smiled and placed the cake carrier gently into the trunk, nestled between 2 pillows so it wouldn't slide. "They complain. I ignore." "Take your phone," she said sternly, "and call me when you get there." "Yes, Mother," I teased, "we're the same age." I left at 4:30 a.m., cardigan packed, along with the lavender hand cream Laurel used to love when she was little. I had a thermos of French roast coffee beside me, the scent filling the car, spiced with cinnamon. The oldies station played softly on the radio songs Richard and I used to dance to in our kitchen. Rain began outside of town, first as a drizzle, then a steady downpour that clung to the windshield. By the time I crossed into Massachusetts, it was a relentless curtain of water. Visibility dropped. My wipers squeaked in rhythm with the throbbing in my knees. "You should have listened to Theda," I muttered, adjusting my grip on the wheel. My fingers were already stiff. At a rest stop, I massaged ointment into my knees under harsh fluorescent lights. The attendant looked worried. "Long drive?" Halfway there, I said, faking a smile. The weather's getting worse, she warned. Might want to wait it out. But birthdays don't wait. I was determined to arrive just before dinner, the one Laurel had planned with friends. I hadn't told her I was coming. I thought the surprise would cut through the distance between us. I didn't yet know the truth. The distance wasn't physical. It had been growing for years. The rain eased just as I turned into Laurel's neighborhood, rows of perfectly manicured lawns and houses that all looked like they'd been plucked from a glossy magazine. Hers stood out, the largest on the cul-de-sac, glowing warm behind its grand windows. I parked across the street to preserve the element of surprise. The cake sat beside me like a living thing, delicate and full of intention. Their front door was unlocked. I stepped inside quietly, water dripping from my coat onto their marble floors. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic, something roasting in the oven. A dinner party, maybe. The kind I hadn't been invited to in years. Voices carried from the kitchen. I took a few steps forward, rehearsing in my head what I'd say. Surprise. Happy birthday, sweetheart. No, maybe just, hi, Laurel. But then I heard my name. Mom called again this morning, Laurel said, exasperated. Third time this week. What did she want? Ethan asked, sounding bored. The same as always. To talk about nothing. To remind me she's alone. To make me feel guilty for living my own life. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. At least she didn't show up for your birthday, Ethan said. Remember last year? She stayed 5 days. Don't remind me, Laurel laughed. I had to hide in our bedroom just to get a break. The words fell like blows. She mentioned maybe visiting soon, Laurel continued. I told her we were too busy. Good, Ethan replied. The last thing we need is her showing up unannounced. Then Laurel said it. God, I hope she crashes. Ethan chuckled. Or at least gets lost. One weekend without guilt trips would be a blessing. They laughed, casual, easy laughter. The cake trembled in my arms. I didn't think. I just walked into the kitchen. They turned, startled, like ghosts caught mid-lie. Their faces drained of color. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I placed the cake on the counter, turned and walked out. They called after me, but I kept walking. The cold rain welcomed me like truth. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed in my damp clothes, staring at the faded wallpaper. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I felt something colder, clarity. The next morning, I called my bank. I'd like to know which accounts I'm currently listed on as a guarantor, I said. After verifying my identity, the voice on the other end hesitated. Do you mean joint accounts, Mom? No, I mean any loans, credit cards, or mortgages where my name is being used as collateral. What she read back changed everything. 4 credit cards, total limit, $75,000, all guaranteed by me. A personal loan, $30,000. And worst of all, a home equity guarantee on their current property, one I'd never even seen. When were these opened? I asked. The oldest is from 8 years ago. The most recent 6 months ago. 6 months ago. The same week Laurel had called me crying about Ethan's job. I'd offered to send money. She said, no, we don't want charity, Mom, just moral support. What she meant was, we already used your name. I wasn't just an emotional burden. I had become a financial safety net they never planned to return. I called Richard's old financial advisor next. I need a full accounting of my assets. Everything. By the afternoon, I had the complete picture. Our house in Vermont had tripled in value. Richard's life insurance had been invested wisely. My pension and stocks had grown steadily. Our family heirlooms, his grandfather's pocket watch collection, my mother's sapphire ring. All of it totaled just over $1.9 million. Enough for the beach house Laurel and Ethan had claimed they couldn't afford plane tickets to visit me from. I called Ethan's mother, Martha, out of courtesy. I understand you're contributing to the beach house, she said cheerfully. I'm not, I said calmly, and I never agreed to. Silence. They said you were covering half the down payment. Well, I replied, they were mistaken. I hung up and stared at the neat stack of paperwork on the motel nightstand, credit statements, loan documents, lies dressed up in spreadsheets. They hadn't just betrayed my heart. They'd spent my trust like it came with no limit. And that's when I realized It was time to cut them off. I made one final call that night to Harriet Moore, my bridge partner of 15 years and the most formidable estate attorney in 3 counties. "I need to see you," I said. "It's about my will." There was a pause, then her familiar, no-nonsense voice replied, "Is this about Laurel?" "Yes, but more than that, it's about me." "Thursday, 10 a.m., don't be late." Harriet's office sat high in a downtown building, overlooking the river. Minimalist furniture, stiff chairs. No place for sentiment. "You look different," she said, instead of hello. "I am." "Good. Sit down and tell me everything." And I did, from the rain soap drive to the overheard cruelty, from the financial betrayals to the fake promises of love. She took notes silently, nodding once in a while but never interrupting. When I finished, she asked, "And what do you want to do now?" "I want to change my will, completely, and I need to disentangle myself from every financial thread they've tied me into." Harriet smiled, brief but proud. "I've been waiting years to hear you say that." Together, we rewrote everything. The house, the investments, the life insurance, all of it would now go to the Haven Hill Women's Shelter, where I had quietly volunteered since Richard died. The same place I'd found solace helping women rebuild their lives after abuse and neglect. Personal heirlooms would be distributed to friends, my library book club, even the pharmacist who had always remembered Richard's birthday. "And for Laurel?" Harriet asked, pen poised. "My recipe box," I said after a long pause, "and my diaries." She raised an eyebrow. "Your diaries?" "Yes. Let her read about the woman she dismissed. Let her learn what real love looked like, even if she didn't recognize it at the time." "Deliciously symbolic," Harriet murmured. "I approve." Next came the financial cleanup. She brought in her associate, a specialist in banking law. We sent certified letters to the mortgage company, credit card issuers, and lenders formally removing me as guarantor or co-signer on everything. "They'll feel this within days," Harriet's associate said. "I'm counting on it." The last thing I signed that morning was a letter to Laurel and Ethan. It didn't explain. It didn't apologize. It simply ended the transaction. And that, I realized, was all the explanation they ever gave me. The fallout came fast. 2 days after I left Harriet's office, Ethan called from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up out of sheer curiosity. "What have you done?" His voice was tight, panicked, not concerned, just desperate. "Hello, Ethan. I'm well, thank you for asking." The bank called. All our credit cards declining transactions, reduced limits. The mortgage company, too. "And Martha," she said, "you told her you're not contributing to the beach house? What's going on?" "I believe it's called reality," I said. "You might want to get acquainted." "We thought you were helping," he said. Laurel said. "I know exactly what Laurel said," I interrupted. I heard it with my own ears. There was silence on the line. Then he shifted gears. "Look, we're under a lot of pressure. You misunderstood that day." "No, Ethan. I finally understood everything." I hung up. The next day, Laurel tried her turn. A long email filled with half apologies and veiled accusations. Phrases like, "You always made me feel guilty, and we never meant to hurt you." Not once did she address the real betrayal. Not once did she say, "I'm sorry." In the weeks that followed, their carefully curated lives began to unravel. The beach house purchase fell through. Without my name on the paperwork, the bank wouldn't approve the mortgage. The down payment they scraped together had to be returned with penalties. Their credit cards were slashed. One was frozen completely. Laurel had to cancel a retreat to Napa Valley. Ethan started working late nights at a second job he claimed it was consulting. Martha called me again, this time not with blame, but with disbelief. "They told us you offered to help," she said. "They lied," I replied gently. For the first time in decades, I felt no need to explain myself. The world didn't collapse. I didn't fall apart. I didn't die of loneliness. In fact, I began to breathe again. I joined a watercolor class at the community center. I replanted the vegetable garden I'd abandoned years ago. I went on a walk with Dada and her dog, and we didn't talk about Laurel at all. Consequences had finally arrived, not from me, but from truth itself. And truth, I found, was the kind of justice that didn't need shouting. The house felt different now. Not emptier, freer. The same walls, the same old maple tree Richard had planted when Laurel was born. but I moved through it no longer as a woman waiting by the phone, but as one finally choosing herself. I unpacked the good china the set I'd been saving for special occasions. I began using it every Saturday for lunch with the. She brought her infamous potato salad. I baked a new carrot cake recipe, this time with orange zest and cardamom. A little bolder, a little less sweet. I started volunteering at Haven Hill Women's Shelter 3 afternoons a week. I helped women half my age prepare for job interviews, rewrite resumes, or simply talk through the pain they hadn't been able to name yet. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes I did too. "You don't seem like most of the older volunteers," one young woman told me. "You get it. Like you've lived through the kind of love that makes you forget your own name." "I have," I replied, "but I remembered it just in time." For the first time in decades, I was building a life not centered around someone else's approval. Not waiting for a call, not hoping for an invitation. I painted. I planted blueberry bushes the had always suggested. I joined a local hiking group for seniors. I woke up with purpose. When Harriet and I met for lunch one afternoon, she raised a toast over iced tea. To Margaret, who finally stopped waiting to be chosen. I smiled and started choosing herself. And yet, even as I moved forward, I remained open not to manipulation, but to possibility. So when Zoe, Laurel's college friend, reached out and asked to meet, I agreed. "She's pregnant," Zoe said over coffee. "About 3 months along. She didn't want to tell you yet. I thought you should know." A grandchild. Something I had always longed for, but no longer expected. Later that day, I sat at my desk and wrote a card, not a text, not an email, but a handwritten note on thick, cream paper. "I've heard your news. A child changes everything, sometimes by presence, sometimes by absence. If you ever want a relationship built on respect, not obligation, my door is open." I signed it. "With love, Mom." Then I placed it in the mailbox and let go of the outcome. Thanksgiving week arrived with early snow. I was preparing a simple dinner for the and a few friends from the shelter when my phone rang. "Mrs. Lane," the voice said. "This is Dr. Leland from Hartford Memorial. Your daughter, Lauren, asked me to call you." My heart tightened. "Is she okay?" "She experienced some bleeding. The baby's fine, but we're keeping her overnight for observation. Her husband is out of town. She asked if you would come." "And did she say why?" I asked quietly. The doctor hesitated. "Only if you meant what you wrote in your card." 3 hours later, I walked into her hospital room. Laurel looked small under the thin blanket, her hand resting on her stomach. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears, not crocodile ones, not performative. Real. "You came," she whispered. "You asked," I replied, settling into the chair beside her bed. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the monitor beeping between us like a metronome for a conversation we hadn't had in years. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said finally. "At first it was for stress, but it's become more." I nodded, letting her speak. She asked why I resent your calls, why I felt guilt instead of connection, why I could say those horrible things. Laurel looked up. "And the truth is, I didn't have good answers, but I'm starting to see it. I punished you for being alone, for needing me, for reminding me of a life I wanted to forget, and because you loved me too much when I didn't know how to love myself." I reached for her hand. "I'd like to try again," she said, "before the baby comes." "So would I," I whispered. It wasn't a resolution. It was a seed. Healing didn't happen all at once. In the months after the hospital visit, Laurel and I began meeting weekly coffee dates with no talk of money, no passive-aggressive remarks, no transactions. Just presence. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we sat quietly. And sometimes we confronted the uncomfortable truths between us. Ethan struggled more. His charm didn't hold the same weight when there were no checks behind it. But he tried for Laurel, for the baby. As for me, I kept the life I had rebuilt. Haven Hill remained in my will, and I added a trust for my grandchild's education. I still hiked. I still painted. And yes, I still baked, but now it was for me. One sunny afternoon, as I folded in shredded carrots and ginger, my phone buzzed. A text from Laurel. A black and white ultrasound image. Beneath it, your granddaughter. She has your nose. I touched the screen gently. Maybe forgiveness wasn't immediate. Maybe it would never be complete. But connection, real, grounded, honest, was beginning. At 79, I learned something far more powerful than revenge. I learned that boundaries are a form of love. I learned that respect can't be begged for, it must be earned. And I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your future is to walk away from those who only value you for what you give, not who you are. The rainstorm that once soaked my coat and my heart had passed. Now, when it rains, I see it differently. Not as something to be endured, but as something that washes the ground clean for what comes next. If you've ever found yourself torn between peace and family, between guilt and truth, I want you to hear this. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not wrong for wanting to be loved with respect. If this story touched something inside you, share it. Comment below, when did you realize your worth? And remember, whether you're 29, 59, or 79, it's never too late to bake a new cake or to begin again.